Welcome back to General Psychology, and this is Memory Lecture Part 2. Before I jump into Memory Part 2, let me apologize if you've already seen Memory Part 1. I just did a little bit of previewing in that video, and I had two problems. One is that I tried to insert subtitles, and somehow that did not work. Now, none of you are hearing impaired, or I would have heard that, but I will work on that at any rate because a few people might find it helpful. The other things that I noticed in that video that there's some really loud ringing noise in the background. I think that happens when I have my downstairs fan on, and so I turned it off for this video, hoping that we won't have a repeat of that problem. It looks like it went away. I apologize at whatever rate it happened. I hope that didn't make your viewing experience unpleasant. All right, memory part 2. We're going to pick up right where I stopped in the last lecture. We're going to talk about some additional aspects of memory. And if I can get the video to work at least, the PowerPoint file to work here, we're going to begin with another of Ebbinghaus's contributions. I briefly mentioned it in the first couple of slides, but Ebbinghaus also discovered a phenomenon called savings. And you could think of savings, if you wanted to, as one of the first hints at what we now call implicit memory. When it looks like a person has completely forgotten something because they studied it, let's say, a decade ago, they haven't used it since, savings shows that something was still there in the memory system. Savings is, as you can see here, the advantage people have in learning previously learned but seemingly forgotten material relative to people, of course, who've never learned it. So I'll give you a really quick example, and I'll give you a couple more later. I took Spanish for 10 weeks in college. Then I took it for a quarter and a half when I was a professor. Once I got tenure at UCLA, the next year I took almost two complete quarters. I took almost two complete quarters. I took a little course here and there, but I had not spoken Spanish in at least a decade, I think it was, when I went to Spain. And they tested me on the first day of my 10-day intensive Spanish course, and they told me, you have a very unusual score. And I was kind of excited, and they said, yeah, it was one of the lowest scores we've ever seen. You're a true beginner. So I felt bad. But what I learned, thankfully, is they put me in a true beginner class, but I very quickly shot ahead of everyone else in the class because the things that I had completely forgotten were still up there someplace. I learned at a much, much more rapid rate than I would have if I'd never had Spanish before. So savings is this phenomenon that shows us that you do have some memory, even though you can't recall or even recognize it, because you learned that material the second or third time around so much more quickly than you would otherwise. And Ebbinghaus was the first person to demonstrate that. He documented it very carefully. Here's a much more recent example. About 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, my daughter, who was only 6 at the time, I guess she had just turned 7 actually, wanted to learn the books of the Bible, and her mom passed this activity off on to me, and I said, well, I used to know the Bible very well, but honestly, I haven't read the Bible in a long time. There's Genesis, Exodus, Leviathan. No, Leviathan, that's a book by Thomas Hobbes. I pretty quickly ran into trouble. So I was pretty sure that the third book was Leviticus. I was pretty sure the last book was either Malachi or Malachi. I got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Acts, I think. And I knew that Revelations was the last book of the Bible. That's called a recency effect, by the way. You can read about that. But I did not know the books of the Bible. I can tell you, I'm not exactly sure how long it took me, but it was something like 10 or 15 minutes to learn something that I'm sure took me many, many days as a kid. And what happened was I had substantial savings, and I had substantial savings because I had learned it, seemed to have almost completely forgotten it. So I can tell you now, without looking, we'll see how far I get. You tell me. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job. I'm going to stop. Yeah, I was making sure Ezra and Nehemiah came up. I could go through that pretty quickly. I might make a mistake, but if you gave me a pencil and a piece of paper, I could write them down. I could count them out. There are 39 books in the Old Testament. There are 27 in the New Testament. I could double check that. And so something that seemed to be completely gone came back to me with very little studying. So savings is an indicator that even when you've consciously forgotten something and you can't retrieve it, you can't dredge it up, there's probably still something up there, unless you had, a major brain injury or something. All right, so that's savings. Another very interesting feature of memory, and this is one that Ebbinghaus probably vaguely knew about. I forget if he documented this officially, but I'm sure he vaguely knew that people can only hold so many things in memory. And we know from a paper published in the late 1950s by a guy named George Miller that one feature of memory, especially short-term memory, not permanent long-term memory, but a big feature of short-term memory is what I call seven, because that's what George Miller called it. He noticed, first of all, just making careful observations, that lots of things seem to come in sevens. You can see the seven dwarves, the seven notes of the Western musical scale. Now, the pentatonic scale, of course, is a bit different, but the Western scale has seven notes. There are the seven samurai. There is the fact that a basic phone number without the area code has 7 digits. There were 7 wonders of the ancient world, the new world, 7 man-made wonders, human-made wonders, and so forth. And of course, there's the simple fact that there's 7 days of the week. I hope it's obvious that human beings invented calendars to artificially chop up the passage of time from days to bigger units to bigger units. And Miller said it's no accident that people in places across the globe chose to make the calendar have 7 days. We could have had an 8-day or a 12-day calendar. We could have had a 13-day calendar. People picked 7, he argued, for a reason. So again, in 1956, Miller pointed out that lots of things come in sevens, and he suggested, pretty cautiously at first, that 7 plus or minus 2, maybe 5, occasionally it's 8, with some very simple things, maybe it's 9. About 7 things is the total number of items of information that we can hold in working memory at any given moment. Now, you can have a million things in long-term memory, but in terms of working memory, short-term memory, things you can juggle and rehearse while you're waiting to write it down or learn it, it's about 7 things. Now, the fact that working memory is limited obviously means that we can only hold so much. So as far as I know, there's nobody, except those rare people who instantly commit everything to long-term memory, who can hold 40 things in short-term memory. That just doesn't happen. It's not the way the human brain works. In fact, some modern memory researchers argue that it's more like 6 than 7, but it's about 7 things, at least 7 simple things that most people can hold in memory. All right, so that other interesting feature of memory is connected at least to the idea that there's long-term memory, which basically is infinite. In principle, you could hold an infinite number of things in long-term memory. And then there's short-term memory, which is much brief, things that are much more briefly held in memory that require rehearsal or they fade away. And that is very limited in how much you can put there. So I think an example of long-term memory for most of you, unless you don't have any aunts, is which of your aunts has the most kids? The answer for me, by the way, is my Aunt Patsy, who's still alive at the age of, let me think, 75 probably. My Aunt Patsy's probably 75. She's a couple years younger than my mom, by the way. So my mom would be 77. I think my Aunt Patsy is 75 unless she's already had a birthday. So my Aunt Patsy has 12 kids. Oh, I'm sorry, I told you that. She has exactly 12 kids. Sadly, one of her kids passed away. I don't know if I mentioned this, about a week ago. So one of my cousins passed away in her early 40s. So now Patsy sadly only has 11 kids. Okay, but she gave birth to 12 who survived to adulthood. Okay, what's the capital of New Jersey? I was pretty sure it was Trenton. I was a little embarrassed that I wasn't positive, but I looked it up on my phone 18 minutes ago, and yes, it is Trenton, so I'm sure of that one. That's committed more or less to long-term memory. If you ask me the capital of Florida, I know it's Tallahassee because I used to live in Florida. If you ask me the capital of Georgia, I was born there. It's Atlanta. I could give you most of my state capitals, and the few that I've forgotten, I could very quickly learn again because of savings. Okay, so that's long-term memory. Examples of short-term memory are the fact, and I looked this up in the spring, I wouldn't have remembered it now, the fact that 18,517 is a prime number. If I ask you for that number in a minute or two, you might be able to generate it. When I saw it earlier today, I'm like, of course I forgot what, I just picked a big prime number, I double checked it. And since I can't do these calculations in my head for prime numbers that big, I had to look that one up, and it'll be gone. It's not in long-term memory. Pretty quickly, it will decay, it will fade away. It will fade away for you pretty soon. That my Aunt Patsy had 12 kids, probably. But even in a week, you could probably say, well, he did mention one of his aunts, Kathy, Patricia something, and she had a bunch of kids, like, I don't know, like 11 or something. Maybe you didn't know it was exactly 12, but you did know, you vaguely remembered that had an aunt who had 12 kids. But right now, for you, that fact is in short-term memory. I hope it's also clear that if I were to rattle off for you the names of those 12 kids in order, I just said them very quickly: Gary, Shane, Sonia, Heath, Justin. It would quit, 12 would be too many. Okay, 12 would be too many. You can't quite hold 12 names in short-term memory. Neither can I, of course. Okay, my aunt's oldest son, by the way, is named Jerry Derryberry Jr., which tells you, because you have this stored in long-term memory, that his dad's name was also Jerry Derryberry Sr. So they carried on that wacky family tradition of giving their kids a cartoon name like Mickey Mouse or Daffy Duck. Jerry Derryberry Jr. is real and alive. He's about 50 years old, and he's named after his dad. I don't know if he named his son, if he has a son, I think he does, Jerry Derryberry the third or Jerry Derryberry Jr., but if he did, and I committed that to long-term memory, I certainly would be able to tell you that. Okay, long-term memory, short-term memory. You read a lot more about those. Before we even get to use the kind of short-term memory that George Miller talked about, though, I can juggle the names of those 5 people I met at the party. I can remember the phone number is 866-7702. 866-77, pretty easy, 02. But if I stop rehearsing that number, it fades away, right? So before we can even get to something to juggle mentally, we have to deal with very short-term memory, and there are 2 of them that have been well documented in the days since George Miller. There is iconic memory, that's visual memory, that decays in about 2 seconds. Maybe for some people it's 2.5 seconds, but in about 2 seconds, iconic memory is gone, or at least basically gone. And then there's echoic memory, which is also fast decaying, but not quite so rapidly decaying. It lasts about 5 seconds. So those are 2 super short-term forms of memory. And if you don't repeat something you've heard, the echoic memory of that phrase, of that saying, is going to disappear in about 5 seconds. That's why if you listen to a person speaking a second or third language for you and they go quickly, if you have to run the tape back to like 15 seconds ago, it's gone. Now, if you can commit it to memory because it means something to you, that's different. But just listening to the sounds is very difficult because echoic memory has a very rapid decay rate. So these are 2 forms of super short-term memory. Okay, we're going to explore both. We're going to explore both iconic memory and echoic memory a little bit here. And I'm going to begin with iconic memory. But before I do that, let me give you a quick memory aid. Beyonce is an icon. The golden arches of McDonald's are icons because you've seen Beyonce's face, you've seen the McDonald's yellow M. Anything you've seen a lot is called an icon. Notice iconic memory is visual memory. Anything you hear bounce back to you because you're yelling into a canyon is an echo. So those are appropriately dubbed names for visual memory, iconic. Auditory memory, things you hear, echoic. Okay, but let's look right now at iconic memory. On the very next slide, I'm going to show you a landscape photo. It will slowly appear and then disappear. And then you're going to see it again after a short mask. A mask is a blank red or green screen that masks what was there so that your iconic memory starts to fade. So it prevents you from like holding on to any after images. And once I've given you that mask, you're going to see it again. And I hope you're going to notice that it's changed in at least a few ways. So your job is to detect the differences, like 7 or 8 of them, maybe 9 of them, between the 2 photographs. All right, here we go. There it is. Okay, just a couple seconds. It's going to come back. It's going to be different. All right, so there it is. It came back. I could have given a longer mask. I think that was exactly 2 seconds from start to finish. But I hope you can see now that a couple things are changed. Almost everybody, I would say about 2/3 of people at least, notice that the branches that are above that globe were not there before. Some people also notice that these two people on the edge of the image were not there before. And a few very perceptive people say there's something about the buildings, maybe that one wasn't even there before. So typically people notice one or two things. A few very perceptive people might notice three things, but I don't think I've ever had a person who's noticed every single change that was made, because iconic memory for all those many, many details in that photograph, it fades pretty quickly. Now I'm going to illustrate that for you this time by doing a similar activity without a mask and without a delay. So you can use your iconic memory in this case, because I'll show you the photo, I'll warn you, and as I change it, you'll be ready for the change and you can use your iconic memory better than you could before. All right, so there it is again. Notice that's the original version. There's no branch here. Yeah, that building was gone. Yeah, those people were gone. But what else changed? See if you can notice at least one other change. Oops, sorry, did that too quickly? You back it up. My bad. I bumped the button. See, now I guess I gave you a head start. See if you can notice at least one more change. When I say one, I'll say 1, 2, 3, change. 1, 2, 3, change. Right? So people often notice something catching your eye around here, maybe around there. Some people notice something around here. I can make it even easier than that by showing you the two images side by side and by circling areas where you need to look. So for example, if you look carefully here, there's a line in the sidewalk that was not over here. And if you look carefully here, there's a very dark line in the sidewalk that is not over there. The things that appeared, I circled in red. Sorry, that keeps happening. And the things that disappeared, okay, that bar there apparently disappeared. I circled over here in yellow. So we have a total of 8 ways in which it changed, And if you have full access to your iconic memory, you can look over here. You can immediately look over there and notice that it's different. You can look here and immediately look over here and notice that you can look here and look there and immediately know that it's different. If you get to use your brief, rapidly decaying 2 seconds of iconic memory, you can confirm what did and did not change. If you have to rely on your iconic memory completely, many seconds later, you can't do that. There are a few very unusual people who can do that. I'm certainly not one of them. It'd be cool if you were one of them. Okay, so that's that. Notice that was iconic memory. There's also echoic memory, auditory memories, memories for sounds, words, music, whistles, whatever. Echoic memories fade quickly, but not quite as quickly as echoic memories. The time limit on the decay function for echoic memory is about 5 seconds. And I'll try to illustrate that for you. Now, it's more fun to do this in a group, and you're not in a group, but I'm going to read for you 5 different things in a nonsense language that makes no sense. There's a little bit of Greek in there in one spot, but basically it makes no sense. And I'm going to read it to you and see how well your echoic memory serves you. So try, hey, you're by yourself, I hope, and if you're at home, nobody's listening, or at least they know you're following instructions. See if you can repeat after me. Okay, number 1, 1 syllable. Co. I hope you just said co. 3 syllables. Trozy saw. Most people can repeat back Trozy saw. 7 syllables. Getting to the limit of that George Miller plus or 7 plus or minus 2. Bibby Zoller Jim Jam Ka. Bibby Zoller Jim Jam Ka. Most students can repeat back. But when I get to 11 syllables, it gets very difficult. A few people can, most people can't. So here are your 11 syllables. Hey, Borozikano Risat Milzorgna. I'm not going to say it again. You'll have to go back and play the tape if you want to. Some people can get that, most people can't. And this one, very few people can get. Okay, here's 15 syllables. Yati Nafkup Lenzib Skif Rira Slally Mistu Lutra. It's just too much. By the time I get to the end of that, more than 5 seconds has passed, and there are too many unusual syllables that you don't recognize because they don't have meaning, and that disappears for most people. So echoic memory is great, but it's got a pretty short fuse. Not as short as iconic memory, but still pretty short. All right. They're there if you want to see them again. Now that you can see it, you of course could read it by just sounding out the words, but if I give it to you auditorily, it very rapidly decays. In fact, if you looked away from it, it would pretty rapidly visually decay. It's not there. It's not still left, burning some imprint on the page or your retina, but both iconic memory and echoic memory have pretty sharp limits. Okay, so that's echoic memory. Just to repeat, iconic memories fade very quickly, about 2 seconds, and echoic memory, auditory memories fade very quickly, about 5 seconds. But notice what happens if either a visual memory or an auditory memory has deep meaning to you. So if I spoke something in a language that you speak, you're not just relying on your auditory memory, your echoic memory, you're relying on your rich representation of that language. I'll give you a couple of examples of that for visual information. If you speak Chinese and you can read Chinese, you'd have no difficulty if I back that up drawing it out for me, because you read and write in Chinese Mandarin. That's in Mandarin. I don't speak Mandarin, but I did look this one up, and the word for that, I believe that means yes, of course, and it's pronounced something like Da Gran Xi, but I'm sure my Chinese pronunciation is not that great. Okay, so that is visual, and if you listen to it, Da Gran Xi, then it's auditory, obviously. Okay, so that's that. If you played football, especially if you're on the high school or college football team, this diagram will make a lot of sense to you, and you could remember most of those details a minute from now, whereas people like me who barely know what a cornerback is or what a free safety is, how a linebacker is different than a fullback, people like me are going to have some difficulty with it. With my son, who loves football, doesn't play it, by the way, but he loves it, knows a lot about it, he would probably be able to repeat this back pretty carefully and tell you what the diagrams mean, because he really follows football. All right, so that's an example of where meaning facilitates memory. And if you read music, which I don't, by the way, you could probably look at this and say, oh, wait, first of all, like Freddie Mercury, oh, he's that old band. Oh, yeah, the band is called Queen. Your parents would know that. You might not. There was a movie about Freddie Mercury a year and a half ago. That might help you. Sorry about that. But one of my students who reads music saw this, and I taught in the spring, and said, oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Bohemian Rhapsody. And if I'm remembering incorrectly, and you read music and you're vaguely familiar with Queen, you could tell me if that is or is not Bohemian Rhapsody. You could even draw that back if you read music really well and get most of the details right, because you can play that music back in your head and you can convert it to the special symbols that musicians use to record music. So if you can use meaning because you speak a language, because you know a lot about football, because you read music, you're going to be way ahead of people like me who doesn't know much about football and can't read music. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit here to really what I think is our final topic in this lecture. It's the basic idea that memory is not always just a passive record of what comes in. It's at least partly an active construction. We just covered constructivism a couple lectures ago, so this is not a new idea to you. I'm going to share with you a research finding that I don't think I left in the book. I meant to take it out because I enjoy doing this with people in lecture, but I'm going to talk with you here about the Dease, Roediger, McDermott paradigm, often called the DRM for short. Dease, Roediger, McDermott, three famous memory researchers who all worked on this idea. And we're going to see exactly how the DRM works. What I'd like you to do here is to pay very careful attention to a list of, I think it's 14 words. It's important to try to remember them, of course, but please do not write any words down, or you will spoil the activity for yourself. I will show them to you, and I will also read them to you. All right, so pay careful attention. Think about the meaning, of course, but don't write them down. Okay, here we go. Candy, sour, sugar, bitter, good, taste, tooth, nice, honey, soda, chocolate, cake, eat, pie. I'm getting hungry. All right, I'd like you to spend a few seconds now to think about the words. Rehearse the list if you want to. Think about their meaning. Give you 10 more seconds. All right, that was about 11 seconds. We can keep moving here. Now what I'd like you to do, and it's important if you want to have fun to try to do this as accurately as you can, take out a little sheet of paper. I hope you keep notes while you listen to the lecture and write down those 4 words. Number 1, safe. Number 2, taste. Number 3, point. And number 4, sweet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, safe, taste, point, and sweet. And then what I'd like you to do next to each word, you can just put Y or N if you want to save some time. And right next to each word, yes, I think that word was on the list, or no, I don't think the word was on the list. But if you think it was on the list, this is the most important part. Is that a vivid memory, or are you just guessing? So I'd like you to make a judgment, yes or no. And for any word or words that you say were on the list, you're going to say that's a vivid memory, or honestly, I was just guessing. So yes or no, and for any yeses, vivid memory or guess. Do that. Right, it should be pretty quick. I can't get a show of hands because you're not here right now, but you wrote yes or no next to each word, and for any word or words that you wrote yes next to, you said V for vivid or G for guess. Okay, I'm going to assume that you had a chance to do that. A couple more seconds in case you didn't. Yes or no, vivid memory or guess. And now that I hope almost everyone is done, in fact, if you're not done, pause the video and give yourself some more time. Pause the video if you need to. Now we're going to pick up. Now we're going to see how you did. You have 4 words: safe, taste, point, and sweet. If I ask for a show of hands, almost nobody says they saw the word safe, by the way. Guess what? You're right, the word safe was on in that list. When I asked for a show of hands in about 30 students, almost all of them, every once in a while a person says, no, I don't remember the word taste. So hands go up, and almost everyone says, I vividly remember because I saw it and I heard it. Okay, so that's what typically happens. Almost no one says they saw the word point. Well, guess what? The word point was on the list. Good job. Something like 85 to 90% of people say they heard the word sweet, and most of those people, I'm going to say 80 to 90% of them say it's a vivid memory. So the most common response is yes, taste, yes, sweet, vivid memory, vivid memory. So let's remember that: taste and sweet, vivid memory, vivid memory. Let's go back to the list. Oh yeah, there it is, taste right there. Taste, taste, taste vividly. Yeah, vividly. But wait a minute. If you look at this list, and of course you can confirm that this is the same list I saw you before because you could back the video up 3 minutes, you can see that the word sweet is conspicuously absent from this list. There is no word sweet. The large majority of people, 85% of people, sometimes it's 90% of people, say they remember a minute or two ago having heard the word sweet, and the large majority of them say they vividly remember it. I do occasionally have a student says, I'm pretty sure it was there, but honestly, I was just guessing. I don't vividly remember it. Well, those people have a little bit more insight, I'm guessing, into their intuitive memory process, because the large majority of people, myself included, the first time I read this list 25 years ago, because it's from a classic study, think they're positive they heard the word sweet. And of course, you can imagine the reason why. First of all, the simple answer, constructivism. The deeper answer, when you read over this list of words and you think about their meaning, they all have a meaningful connection, a semantic connection to the word sweet. Candy is sweet, sugar is sweet, sour is the opposite of sweet, bitter is a different opposite, sweet is a taste. I like things that are not soda sweet, cake is sweet, chocolate sweet. All those words are connected to the word sweet. It's almost like the word sweet is at the center of a conceptual midpoint of those words or a web of knowledge about those words. And for that reason, people have the very typical experience of being positive that they saw the word sweet when we can show, of course, that they didn't. So that's the Dease Roediger McDermott effect. It's a memory bias, a false memory paradigm that shows that it's surprisingly easy to plant false memories in people's heads. There are lots of other ways to do it. This one is the simplest. All right, so that's Dease, Roediger, and McDermott. That tells us again that that memory is very susceptible to the effects of suggestion, and I bet you could guess that that's particularly true for children and for people who are older whose memories are starting to fail them, or for kids who haven't quite developed a lot of memory tips and tricks yet. So we often believe things that things happen when they didn't, and we also tend to believe things, even as adults, by the way, if we merely see them or hear them more often, even if we know when we hear them, when we see them, that there's a good chance they're not true. And of course, unscrupulous politicians will sometimes take advantage of this. And I'll give you a quick example that's probably that probably still drives Barack Obama crazy to this day. For a long time, people made the false claim that Obama was not born in the US. They repeated the rumor all over the internet. It made it to the news. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, that guy who did racial profiling, argued it all the time. Trump, of course, made it a piece of his campaign back in 2016 and still now kind of begrudgingly sort of admits that maybe he was wrong. But even if you know something is a rumor, and even if you suspect it's planted by people who have a reason to want to spread that rumor, the more often you hear it, the more correct, the more true it starts to seem. So the echo chamber, people sometimes call social media sources like Facebook an echo chamber. The echo chamber of things like Facebook can make lots of things feel true just because politicians and people who work for them and people who support them repeat them over and over and over. That it's even worse than that because something called source memory, I think I mentioned it in the module you read, I hope I did. Source memory is particularly difficult to validate or figure out. So I know that I heard something. I know I heard that. I don't know for sure if it's true or not, but I don't know who told me that. And if I don't know who told me that, it makes it more difficult for me to separate fact and fiction. So if my brother, the physicist, told me that, that's the answer to the equation. But if my sister, who thinks physics is crazy and loves art, she told me that, I don't know if it's true or not. So politicians, advertisers, unscrupulous con artists, other people can take what they know about the way memory works and they can use that to create rumors that grow and build and spread and sometimes ruin people's careers and their lives even. Okay, so that's that. It is a lie that millions of fake votes were cast for Hillary Clinton. People have looked very carefully into this and they've just documented that fake voting almost never happens. Almost ever. And if you're going to steal an election to get a bunch of people to go in one vote at a time, it just doesn't happen. It's a crazy claim. But if you keep making that claim long enough, you will see, and I'm sure Trump's experts had an idea this was true. If you say it long enough, people will start to believe it. So back in 2018 or so, and I think I pulled this off Politico, I think it was Politico, 1 in 4 voters believed that his vote fraud claims were true. Okay. Oh, it looks like it was 2017, not 2018. So if you repeat something long enough, people will start to think it's true, unfortunately, because memory is malleable. Memory is flexible. Memory is subject to constructivism. Okay. Why do they believe it? Because of constructivism, because they keep hearing it. Okay, so now that you know, I don't normally do this one because I normally run out of time in the lecture at about this point, but since we have a little bit of time, I'm going to read you another list of words out loud at a quick pace. Now that you know about the DRM effect, let's see what happens with the DRM effect. I don't think I've ever tried this in a live audience, so we're going to try it. Read these words as I read them to you without writing any of the words down. Right? We're doing a repeat of that little experiment. Okay? Doctor, surgery, ambulance, nurse, bandage, ER, recovery, medicine, illness, treatment, HMO, insurance, fracture, patient, paramedic, ICU. Okay. Now, again, if there's a single principle that predicts better than any other principle, what are the people doing? Remember, it's meaning. But before we do anything else, let me give you a second to think about the words. Notice I did not put COVID-19 in there. I probably should have to update things, but it's not there. You can certainly remember some of those words. I think what I meant to have for you next is the actual test. Let's see, did I do it? Hope I did it. Let's see. Hope I didn't accidentally, no, I was worried that I accidentally got rid. Okay, now you have the very same test you took before, of course with a different list, so go through very quickly. Health, punch, hospital, and clown, and indicate yes or no, vivid or guess. Now you're probably going to be cautious about saying vivid anymore, but it still can't hurt to try it. And then I want to know yes or no for each of those 4 words. Now that you know about the DRM effect, what's your judgment now? I'll give you 15 seconds, yes or no for each of those 4 words. Health, punch, hospital, clown. All right, in case you want to keep thinking, pause your video right now because very quickly I'm going to jump into the answers. So a quick second to pause if you want to. Pause the video if you need more time. And now we're going to answer it. Let me say a couple things. First of all, you know about the DRM effect now, DRM effect. Secondly, I didn't give you, jumped quickly right to the test, so there wasn't as long a window for your memory to decay. But I'm guessing that a very common answer is nobody said punch or clown, but a good number of people say, I think health was on there, but I don't know about hospital. So I'm going to say, if I have to pick one, I'm going to say it was health. Some people say, no, actually, no, the word health wasn't on there. I'm going to go with the word hospital, which a typical answer, at least based on what I would expect, would be to say either health or hospital, but probably not both. I know about the DRM effect. But I hope you're struggling with that right now because the DRM effect is so powerful that it does feel like those words would have been there. And if I force you to make a bet or a gamble right now, I'm guessing more people will say health than hospital. Maybe I'll get a show of hands tomorrow, but that's what I'm guessing. When I did this myself today, I hadn't seen this in months because I don't normally get to this in my lecture. I said, I know the word hospital wasn't because that's the word that those words are connected to, but I'm pretty sure the word health was in the list. And I tested myself, and guess what? Whoops, let me back that up for you. Let me back that up. The word health is not there. So I fooled myself. I knew the word hospital wasn't there because I made up those words, not from the research, from my own knowledge of hospitals. I've been there a few times. I picked words like, medicine, ICU, paramedic, doctor, surgery, because they're connected to the word hospital. But because I had never really done this with a group of people, maybe I did it once a year or so ago, I fooled myself into thinking, yes, the word health was probably on the list. And I was wrong. So the DRM effect is sufficiently powerful that even if you know about it, you can't easily escape it. At least you can't completely escape it. Okay, so maybe it makes you much more cautious about saying yes, but it doesn't completely insulate you or protect you from that powerful constructivism effect. All right, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So we're done here. Um, I at one point had a conclusion slide, but that must have disappeared somehow. So thank you for paying attention. And I will post this very quickly. And I'll hope to talk to everyone in the class tomorrow. Thanks. Or if you're a Friday person, maybe over the weekend, but we'll see. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.